producing electronic music for about 20 years. I started in game audio a couple of years ago. My partner is a games designer and she needed music for her level, and she said to me, "Can you do some music?" I'm sure, why not? Next thing I know, I've got other people saying, "Can you do music for me? Can you do music for me?" So I started doing sound design, and recently started my own company, Strange Band Audio, to deliver audio solutions to the games industry. So this is largely has come out of a couple of things actually. I was an email conversation with a colleague in Melbourne. We talked about the sonic palette and how we can get this into the games industry, because we think it's a really cool thing. So I suppose. Okay. So the first thing a lot of people, when you think of when you speak of the sonic palette, is a bunch of multicolored hedgehogs. That's not what it's about. It's a concept that originated in the music business, the world of music, composition, orchestras, back in the 70s, and they were talking about the total tonal range of an instrument or a piece of music or a composer's body of work. So that's the reason you can distinguish Edvard Grieg from 9 Inch Nails. But it occurred to me, whilst trying to get this concept across to students at AA in Sydney, that when you apply this to a game, it becomes the sum total of all the audio within the game and everything that you can hear. And any game at its core can be said to be interactions within an environment, and it's that environment that helps you define the sonic palette. I've got a great little video here. You probably recognise this. I haven't actually played the game myself, but I was doing some research on the game I'm working on at the moment, which is, we were trying to go for a Switch release. I was doing some research, and Zelda's got a great sonic palette. It's obviously a high fantasy game, and we all know the premise behind it. So it's got these fantasy elements. But there are some things like this, which are actually obviously high technology interactions. So the sound palette for that changes.
That is a sheet of slate. Take it. It will help guide you after your long slumber.
So the sounds for this are much more technological than chimes, bleeps, kind of thing. It sounds more like something out of the Star Trek universe rather than a fantasy universe. My only complaint with the sonic palette for this is those little piano stings that are harking back to the original Zelda games. To my ear, they're like half a semitone out or something. I don't know what it is, but they just don't seem to sit very well with the rest of it. So when the music comes in, and obviously we're not going to go into the music for this yet because it's too much and soon doing it too long. It still matches that very high fantasy element of Zelda, and helps hold that sonic palette together. Now, it occurred to me, like, when you can change this, and it has a massive effect on the game and the feel of it. And as a little experiment, I went and found another video. Read the.
I think you are now ready. Ready to hear what
Have a listen to this.
100 years ago.
Let's not go to Camelot. It is a silly place.
See, as you can see, it still has that sort of fantasy element, but the total feel of it is changed entirely. And a lot of this came out of trying to integrate audio into games much, much earlier than is normally done. I've been doing this in conjunction with AI in Sydney. Part of the problem we found was that trying to get audio into games is the traditional thing. It's left to the end, drop it in at the last minute. From an audio point of view, that doesn't help us. We feel that doing it earlier helps the game, and we were trying to work out how to integrate it much, much earlier. So we started talking about this concept of the sonic palette with the students right at the beginning of production. We found that when we started doing it, and we were talking about the mood of the game, color of instruments, and when the art guys hear this, they start thinking, okay, well, that affects how they're creating their assets, and this is, I believe, the basis of Sally Keller's talk at GCAP in October. The collaboration between art and audio, you get this massive, cohesive, wonderful bouncing of ideas off each other, and it becomes much more powerful as a production tool. So, I forgot where I was going with that. So what we were doing is, getting into production early, and we found that if we define this sonic palette at the beginning of the production, and then start integrating the audio assets very early on at the same time as the art assets, it gives us time to refine those audio sounds, the music, the sound effects, and get a much more polished production happening. When we're iterating this on, we were iterating on a weekly basis, we found that the development of the characters came across much quicker. The development of the audio came across much quicker. And we're getting much more polished games. We're doing 2 at the moment, was Dragons versus Princesses, which is basically a MOBA for kids. So it's Overwatch for 8-year-olds. And the other one is a VR project called Illuminate, which is best described as the journey through a mind of an autistic girl. So I can relate to that one. And yeah, we're finding that the development process is going a lot quicker than they normally expect, and we're getting great gameplay footage after 5 days that we can essentially use. Because it's got audio, we can drop this in the social media and start using it for marketing. So what am I doing for time? So, But when I talk about it being the sum of all the sounds in there, it's your in-game music, atmospheric, soundtrack, the ambient spatial stuff, and UI UX importantly. So all that user interaction stuff. You can refine that audio much quicker and work out what works and what doesn't. That's the most important thing, is working out what doesn't. Because we found that when we're producing Dragons and Princesses, the producer had her heart set on a hurdy-gurdy soundtrack. I don't know if you know hurdy-gurdies, they're a medieval instrument with this clang. And so I produced us some music, and we dropped it in there in the first week. And I said to her, I had this joke of 90% of my job is telling game developers that they're wrong about the music they want. And I said to her, I'm not sure it's going to work. So we dropped it in there, and sure enough, it didn't fit the gameplay. For the gameplay, it was much too slow. We recorded this at 120 beats per minute. But on testing, we found that the gameplay is much more like 180 beats per minute. And if we shipped it with that, it just wasn't going to work. So I'll show you the gameplay footage we did. This is it. This is after 5 days worth of test. There we go. As you can see, this music's just not working for us. And you practically learn that very quickly. So we're going for a really cutesy Nintendo kind of feel for it. A few days we did this one. Now we've got, there we go, we killed the music. As you can see, this is still all grey box stuff, and this is what, 10 days of production. So there's still a long way to go, obviously. But we can see the refinements. So, still that. So yeah, to recap. Sonic power is defined by the universe in which the game is set, so you're building worlds, and the important thing I kept telling to the students is, what does that world sound like? If you're in it, what can you hear? When you're defining your sonic power, use analogies, use simile, use emotion. Onomatopoeia is great for user interaction stuff, so you want bleep, ping, that kind of thing. Things like, I've had people say to me, I want something that's really dark. Well, what does that mean? That could mean, to one person it could mean something that's all bass notes, and someone else it could be heavy metal. But yeah, the real use in this is if you integrate early and you iterate it, and then you get much better audio, you get much better gameplay, much better product. So, any questions?
Yes. With pixel art games, sometimes people go for a little bit of color palette.
Yes.
To mimic the classical games. Can you comment on your opinion, your limited sonic palette for a game, and how minimal can you go before it's kind of perfect?
That's something I have to test, to be honest. I mean, you can go down to 8-bit audio, which is your classic game audio, is 8-bit.
But what I mean is not just in the bits, but in the amount of tracks that you use. Like, would it be possible to pull off with a single soundtrack, with just a backing track with no, I'm gonna hear sounds or sound effects, just a backing track.
Yes,
Yeah.
easily.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna fit the aesthetic of the game. If you've got a very very simple game with limited palettes, little art palettes, very stylistically simplistic, then you want simplistic music to match that. I recently did a game called Time Cube, which was basically 2D vector graphics, and I made a soundtrack to match it, which was very very simplistic. It was. I wish I had the audio to show you, but uh, it was basically synthesizers, but very very simple synthesizers. It was almost down to sine wave kind of level of simplicity. So that's what made it work. Anyone else?
In your, your experience of integrating really, which is obviously a good idea, do you have that thing of need to trust your team to be able to imagine that it's going to be better, and do you have gaps? Do you attempt to sort of aim for maximum coverage of things are there that your placeholder, or more complete things and have other things that are completely not there, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, we've been prioritizing the audio we want. And essentially everything in there is placeholder, but it's placeholder I've made.
Yes.
And that then gives me the scope to say, okay, well that's working, but I need to refine it, or that one's great, and I don't need to touch it. Some things we haven't touched yet. Like after we've nixed that level music, I haven't produced any more yet. I'm going to be doing that when I get back to Sydney. Again, it's a prioritization. I mean, because we're doing weekly sprints, we want to be able to produce something that's playable at the end of the week. Essentially, theoretically, a complete product. Not that it is at the end of the day, but theoretically. You basically have to pick and choose, okay, what's the priority here? We want these interactions to happen, we want those interactions to happen. So we have to have the audio to go with them. The lower priority ones get left to the next sprint.
Do you ever get the others who are listening to it as they go through it, sort of saying, sounds like incomplete or bad quality or something, and you say, I know.
Yes,
yeah,
all the time.
Yeah. But they get used to that, I guess. And
They do, yeah, and they'll be saying that, and then I'll replace the sounds with the next iteration, the refinement, and they go, yeah, that's so much better.
yeah. Well, I guess they do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, like the noise of the dragon's footsteps. They were going, okay, what do we have? It just had footsteps running through grass, and we mapped that to the dragon's feet, so it was 4 footsteps. And they were saying, okay, it's great, but it's not cute enough. So I added like a squeak and a spring noise to it and mapped them together. So it sounded like a Warner Brothers cartoon. And that's what they were aiming for. And they went, that's so cute. Perfect. So, yes.
Kind of, I guess, like talking about the integrating early engineering sort of aspect.
Yeah.
Normally, whenever I make a game, it's like what you said, like if I'm doing a game jam, it'll be like a month-long game jam, and I'll spend 3.5 weeks doing the game itself, and then maybe a day or 2 on the audio solely, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, usually doesn't. Have you ever experimented with, instead of designing the audio around a game, perhaps doing the soundtrack first and designing a game around that?
I've given it some thought, yeah. I mean, that's a project I'd obviously love to do. It's just finding the team that's going to back that up. I mean, I've had a few ideas for audio-based games where audio is the prime driver for the game mechanic, but we're still trying to work out how to actually do that. one of the things I am going to be working on in a week or so is a project. We're going to be using audio as the triggers for the vibration job, so haptic feedback for visually impaired games, and using that audio to define the vibration settings and that sort of thing. So basically, recreating the sounds physically through the controlled. That's going to be a fairly long project, and whether it'll actually result in anything useful or not, I don't know. But we think there's a lot of potential there, a lot of scope to play around with audio and maybe do weird things. So yeah, apparently we're out of time. Thank you.